Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin and the fact that it is having yet another correction. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Remember, if you want to know how I'm navigating these markets, check out the premium list, and you can find a link to the sale and lock in the low rate in the description below as well. Let's go ahead and jump in. So Bitcoin has just been dancing between 50K to 60K for a number of months now, with some slight deviations outside of that range, but for the most part Bitcoin has been trending sideways. Okay, and this goes all the way back to, you could argue that it started in early February, so about 3 months now of mostly sideways movement. Yes, we were putting in new all-time highs, but I don't really think these all-time highs were that significant in the grand scheme. They were not like the other price discovery modes we had seen, right? When we broke above 20K here, we just instantly shot up. And then when we broke above 42K, we just instantly shot up. And then these were more or less just slow, very, very slow, much slower moves to the upside, right? Just marginally increasing that prior all-time high. Okay, so we look at this today, and I don't know how you guys want to draw the lines. Obviously, there's a number of ways you could draw them. You could draw it like that, or you could draw it sideways, and it depends on what narrative you want to tell. But at the end of the day, we always know that the 20-week SMA is a decent benchmark in a bull market. It's a decent benchmark in a bull market, and now the 20-week SMA. And it's been so long since we tested it, it's now at almost $49,000, okay? So the 20-week SMA is now at $49,000. The 21-week EMA is at about $47,000. And I told you guys a few weeks ago that historically speaking, again, it's not what I think, it's basically just saying, okay, well, historically speaking, when you get a cross of the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA, the price of Bitcoin shortly thereafter tests it, okay? Here was a cross back in 2019. Tested it a few weeks later. Sometimes we get the cross of those two moving averages when the price crosses it. Okay, and there you could go back further in time and see here they cross, and then we tested that 20-week SMA a couple weeks later. Now that the price of Bitcoin, at the time of this video right now, it's at 53.8K, 53.8. Now, for us to go to the 20-week SMA, we would need to drop about 9%. Which, in the grand scheme of things, isn't even that large of a move anymore, 9% to get to the 20-week SMA. Now, to get to the 21-week EMA, it would actually take a little bit more, maybe around 12 to 13%. Remember, we've often discussed the idea of two separate things here. Okay, two separate things. One of them being long consolidation in a bull market. Remember, this bull market was straight up, but it really wasn't, okay? There were still periods where we mostly just went sideways for upwards of half a year, and there were scary times and bullish times, but we still went sideways. The other thing we've discussed is, what if we get a double peak cycle like 2013? We said this many times before. What if this cycle will be remembered as a double peak cycle, similar to this one, where we actually broke the 20-week moving average on the weekly time frame, and if you zoom in, we were only below it for a very brief period of time, but we broke the 20-week SMA here. So the idea that we can't break it is not true. We could, and maybe that wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing in the world if that were to happen. Now, you should know that breaking the 20-week SMA will bring it will bring less confidence to the altcoin market. Okay, so the altcoin market will have less confidence if Bitcoin breaks the 20-week SMA. But the reason we're looking at this is because I want people, I want everyone to know that in the grand scheme of the market cycle, if anything, Bitcoin has been ahead of schedule for a very, very long time. And let me just overlay the bar patterns. I'm sure most of you guys already know what I'm going to do, but if it's good for an update, and even if you haven't seen it before, I think just looking at it for the first time is useful. Okay, so that was the first cycle from cycle bottom. Here was the second cycle from market cycle bottom. And we've noticed before that the ROI tends to diminish some. And it depends on where you draw this one. Obviously, you go to the wick, it'd be way up there. If you go say this one, it would be closer to that level. So we know that the ROI diminishes each cycle. Now, if you get the next one, it started there, and if we overlay that one, it looks something like that, okay? Something like that. And it's hard to get it exact because obviously there's wicks and whatnot. But what you notice and what we've contended all along is that it will likely be difficult for the current cycle to keep pace with the last one. Now, so far, Bitcoin has basically just said, hold my beer. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And it's been able to keep pace with it so far. Remember that, and maybe if I actually draw this at the cycle bottom there, but remember, at one point, the current cycle was ahead of cycle 2, and we did not keep pace with it. Here we're currently ahead of cycle 3. I don't really think we're going to keep pace with it. A lot of people do. If they're right, I'll be happy because we'll be going to a $300,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year. I'm very pessimistic about the odds of that happening. I would love a $300,000 Bitcoin, don't get me wrong. I just don't believe that Bitcoin's going to go up 6x in the next like 4 or 5 months. I think that's a little bit too lofty of a goal. Okay, so this is one way to look at it. And I don't really think, I think looking at it this way, not only do you see that the ROI diminishes, but you see the time from the bottom to the top gets longer as well. There's a lot of people that say that it doesn't make sense for them to get longer and that this one won't be longer than the last. And hey guys, there's always a chance there's always a chance that it doesn't. There's always a chance that peaks this September, like a lot of people think. I'm just going off what prior cycles have shown, right? I'm just going off what prior cycles have shown, and that you get a diminished ROI, and the amount of time between the bottom and that market cycle top gets longer each cycle. Now, if something else happens this time, then it's fine. I mean, who cares? No big deal. If we end up going up and going to 6 figures sooner rather than later, then so be it. It is what it is, and this market cycle will be different. Or the alternative is we do what we've done in the past and ultimately don't put in an ROI that matches the prior cycle, and maybe we peak somewhere lower than that. And maybe it'll take longer than it did the last cycle. And I generally think that the price of Bitcoin will probably peak this cycle between $100,000 to $200,000, but it doesn't mean you can't have some nasty corrections along the way, and we've already had a few, right? We've had a 27%, a couple 26 to 27% corrections. We've had a 31% correction. We haven't even had a 40% correction yet. So that is something that we should keep in mind. Okay, that's something we should keep in mind. Remember, though, that even if we don't get a correction, there's nothing wrong with going sideways for a while. Remember, the last cycle did it. The last cycle went sideways for long periods of time. I mean, this one, again, was about half a year. We had other periods like this one where we went sideways for another half a year or so. And this is fairly normal for a bull market. It's fairly normal for us to get sideways movement. So my contention here is whether we go sideways or whether we go down, it doesn't really make a huge difference because we actually are ahead of schedule if you compare to the last market cycle. So if anything, Bitcoin was ahead of where I thought it was going to be at this point in the cycle. And even sideways movement is not the worst thing in the world. So sometimes you just have to take a step back and realize, all right, guys, in the grand scheme of the market cycle, time's on our side. In the grand scheme of the market cycle, time is on our side. There's going to be corrections along the way. That's just how markets work. I mean, there's going to be people taking profits. I sometimes take profits, okay? So we have to remember that in the market cycle, in the grand scheme of the cycle, it seems by a lot of different indicators that time is on our side. If you want to talk about short-term moves, could we get a 10% correction tomorrow or could we go up 10% tomorrow? I'm not the guy that can tell you that because I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in the short term. I just look at the longer term trends mostly and try to come to conclusions based off macro trends in the market. And looking at the market cycle ROI, we can see that in fact we are still slightly ahead of schedule. So I would just say, for me personally, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride because it's gonna be one hell of a ride. It's not gonna be an easy one. No one ever promised that riding Bitcoin's price action for a few years was going to be easy. We never promised that. But the people that stick to it, and even the people that just don't sell at market cycle tops, right? Even the people that just sit through it and watch it drop 80%, even these guys are still up, over 2x, even if they bought at the peak in 2017. So remember, in the grand scheme of the market cycle for Bitcoin, it seems that time is on our side. Though there could be corrections along the way, and there could be nastier corrections than the ones we've seen so far along the way as well. Time is on our side there. Even if in the future we're at a market cycle top, even if you don't want to sell, I would argue that in the grand scheme of Bitcoin's life, time is on our side, and that yes, there's going to be corrections along the way, but hey, you're still probably going to see it ultimately trend up over time. And there's still a lot of institutions that even haven't gotten on board yet. This cycle to me seems like the market cycle of institutions. And as far as I can tell, there have been some institutions that have come on board. There's still a ton more that haven't yet. And we're still waiting for these guys to get on board. And that makes me excited. That makes me excited for the market cycle to know that there still are a lot of institutions that are getting on board, and that they're trying to figure out the best way to get Bitcoin on their books. It's just not the easiest thing to do without going through a lot of without jumping through a lot of hoops. Okay, so I would not sweat these corrections. Again, this is not an emergency video or anything like that. It's just a natural move in the market. You'll see the altcoin market react accordingly. But I would say just take a step back, look at where we are in the grand scheme of the cycle, and try to relax a little bit. Thank you guys for tuning in. Remember to check out the premium list. You can lock in the lower rate if you want to know how I'm navigating these market cycles. Check out the sale on the premium list in the description below. Remember, we do have a store for merchandise, so if you want to get yourself an Into the Cryptoverse t-shirt, you can check out the link to that in the description below as well. Definitely subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Bye.